Throughout the decades, the S&P 500 weathered its fair share of storms. From the oil crisis of the 1970s to the dot-com bubble burst of the early 2000s, the global financial crisis of 2008, COVID in 2020, each crisis tested the resilience of the index. Hi guys, this is Navtej Aluwalia and welcome back to my channel. You have probably heard about it a million times, but what's the deal with S&P 500? Why do we care? And how does it affect our investments? Let's dive right in. What is the S&P 500? The Standards & Poor's 500 index, the pulse of the market. Alright, so picture this. The S&P 500 is like a big basket of America's top 500 companies. We are talking about the heavy hitters from every corner of the market. Tech giants, healthcare, financial empires, you name it. You may now be wondering what companies are included in this S&P 500 index. Among the most well-known names in the businesses are those of tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, as well as financial empires like JP Morgan, Chase. And that diversity is key, my friends. It gives us a bird's eye view of how the entire US economy is doing. When the S&P 500 moves, it's like the whole economy is shifting gears. S&P 500 is weighted by market cap, which means the bigger companies carry more weight. So if Apple or Amazon sneezes, you better believe that S&P 500 is going to catch the cold. But why should you care? It's your benchmark for measuring how well are your investments doing. When S&P 500 goes up, it's like getting a thumbs up from the market gods. It brings in confidence and growth. But when it takes a nosedive, it's time to batten down the hatches because stormy weather might be ahead. It's like the market is whispering the secret for those who know how to listen. The story of S&P 500 begins in 1923 when the Standard & Poor's introduced S&P 90. It included 90 companies and served as a benchmark for the industrial sector. Fast forward to 1957 and the index expanded to include 500 companies, hence the birth of S&P 500. Throughout the decades, the S&P 500 weathered its fair share of storms. From the oil crisis of the 1970s to the dot-com bubble burst of the early 2000s, the global financial crisis of 2008, COVID in 2020, each crisis tested the resilience of the index. But here's the kicker. Despite these setbacks, the S&P 500 has proven time and time again to be a resilient survivor. It's adapted, evolved, and came back stronger than ever. Historically, the S&P 500 has delivered an average annual rate of return of around 7 to 10% after adjusting for inflation. However, it is important to know that these returns can fluctuate significantly over shorter period due to market volatility. For instance, if we consider the long-term average from 1926 to 2021, the nominal annual return of the S&P 500 has been approximately 10% before inflation. When adjusted for inflation, this return typically falls around 7 to 8%. Long-term government bonds averaged a 5.31% gain. 30 days Treasury bill averaged 3.24%. And short-term government bonds averaged a 4.94%. The S&P 500 index did more than twice. Because the S&P 500 serves a good stand-in for the overall US stock market. Many experts, including the likes of Vanguard founder Jack Bogle and legendary investor Warren Buffett, advocate for average person to invest in S&P 500 index fund. In fact, Buffett even left instructions for 90% of his estate to be invested in S&P 500 upon his death. He says, "There is no better bet than America." The infamous phrase, beating the market. What does that mean exactly? Well, it's all about trying to score a higher investment return than the performance of S&P 500. But here's the thing. While it's a dream of many to beat the market, the reality is that only a select few are able to do so. About 89% of the fund manager fails to beat the market. Over the last 10 years, the S&P 500 has outperformed the large cap US funds by about 89%. When compared to their benchmark indexes, over a 10-year period, 97% of their funds underperform S&P 500. Additionally, the market was underperformed by all professional fund investing strategies, including growth, value, big, mid, and small caps, as well as all caps. There is a greater chance that the funds will underperform their benchmark indexes the longer they are measured. Beating the market for 1 to 3 years is a somewhat typical occurrence. That is mostly the result of luck. However, the evidence clearly shows that even an experienced fund manager cannot consistently outperform the market over a longer time horizon, such as 10 to 15 years. In 2008, Warren Buffett bet $1 million on the idea that hedge funds would not be able to outperform the market over a few years. Resulting, hedge funds saw an average rate of return of 22% in 2016 compared to the S&P 500 index, which did four-folds higher return of 85%. You see, there are all sort of factors working against you. Human emotions, investing fees, taxes, the list goes on. It's like trying to swim upstreams against a raging river. Now here's the fun fact. Sometimes people do tend to outperform the market by accident rather than through expertise or skills. Crazy, right? It's like finding a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But hey, here's the silver lining. Even if you can't quite beat the market, investing in a simple S&P 500 index fund while keeping your fees low can still put you ahead of the game. To invest in an index like S&P 500, you need to purchase shares of index mutual funds or ETFs that seek to mimic the performance of index, like Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, iShares Core S&P 500 ETF, and SPDR S&P 500 ETF. Imagine you invest $10,000 in S&P 500, which historically has yielded an average rate of return of 7 to 10%. Now let's see how compound interest works its magic over time. After first year, your $10,000 investment grows by 7% to $10,700. Now here is where it gets interesting. In the second year, that 7% rate of interest isn't just applied on your initial $10,000 investment, but it's also applied to the $700 you earned in the first year. So now your investment is worth $11,449. Fast forward few years, you will see the power of compounding in action. By year 10, your initial $10,000 investment could potentially grow to over $19,671 thanks to the snowball effect of compound interest. But here is where it gets even more exciting. When you combine compound interest with the historical return of S&P 500, the results are astonishing. Let's say you invest $100,000 into S&P 500 and leave it untouched for the next 30 years. Assuming an average annual rate of return of 8%, thanks to the power of compounding, your initial investment of $100,000 could potentially balloon to just over $1 million. But remember, while compound interest is a powerful tool for building wealth, it requires time and patience. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but rather a long-term strategy for building wealth and financial success. When it comes to stock market, time is your most precious resource. You can make your investment now and hold on to your money for as long as you can to maximize your return. And that's a wrap for today. I hope you enjoyed our little chat about the S&P 500. If you did, smash the like button. Subscribe for more financial wisdom and share this video with your investing buddies. Thanks for watching. See you next Sunday. Until then, goodbye.